Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 104b. Top of the page with the words V'i'i Kamilsa Yatira Tehave Letishas Kabin Hadri. And if, after this calculation, there is still a surplus in excess of a quarter kav per sa, equal in size to an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed, the entire surplus must be returned. Eisve Raveler of Nachmin, She'im Chervasa de Beis Tisha Kabin, Lav Dezavin Le Koraim, Loi, Dezavin Le Kor. Rava raised an objection to Nachman. The Mishnah teaches that if the surplus in the field was an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed, the buyer returns the land to the seller. Isn't this the halacha even in a case where he sold him a field measuring 2 kor? This would seem to indicate that even if the surplus does not exceed a quarter kav per sa, as a quarter kav per sa in a field of 2 kor is 15 kav, the sole determining factor is whether or not the surplus is equal in size to an area required for the sowing of 9 kav. Rav Nachman rejects this argument. No! The case in the Mishnah is specifically where he sold him a field measuring 1 kor. Uvagina beis chatzi kav lav dezavin le sasayim lo dezavin le se'ah. Rava raised a further objection to Rav Nachman. We learned in the continuation of the Mishnah that if the surplus in a garden was an area required for the sowing of a half a kav of seed, the buyer returns the land to the seller. Isn't this the halacha even in a case where he sold him a garden measuring 2 se'ah? Once again, this would seem to indicate that the surplus is returning to the seller, provided that it is equal in size to the minimum measure of a garden, even if the surplus does not exceed 1/2 of a kav per 2 se'ah, which is equivalent to 1/4 of a kav per se'ah. Rav Nachman rejects this argument as well. No, the case in the Mishnah is where he sold him a garden measuring a se'ah, so that the surplus is proportionally twice as large. Uchediver Rabbi Akiva beis rova mai lav dezavin le se'ah lo dezavin le chatzi se'ah. Rava raised yet another objection to Nachman from the next clause in the Mishnah, which states, or according to the statement of Rabbi Akiva, if the surplus in the garden was an area required for sowing a quarter kav of seed, the buyer returns the land to the seller. What, isn't this the halacha even in a case where he sold him a garden measuring a se'ah? In that case, the surplus does not exceed 1/4 of a kav per se'ah, and nevertheless the surplus is returned to the seller, provided that it is equal in size to the minimum measure of a garden. Rav Nachman also rejects this argument. No, the case in the Mishnah is where he sold him a garden measuring a half se'ah, so that the surplus is proportionally twice as large. Boy Rav Ashi, Sadeh v'nasi gina v'nasi sadeh mai teku. The Mishnah teaches that in the case of a field, the buyer can return the land itself in the surplus if the surplus was an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed, and in this case of a garden, if the surplus was an area required for the sowing of a half kav of seed. Rav Ashi raises a dilemma. If one sold a field and it turned out that the plot was larger than had been stipulated, but before the buyer returned the surplus, the plot was turned into a garden. Or if it was initially a garden and it was turned into a field, what is the halacha? Is the surplus governed by the halacha applying to a field or by those applying to a garden? The Gemara answers that a dilemma shall stand unresolved, as no answer has been found. Tana im haya samuch l'sadeu afilu kolshu machzir lo karka. A sage taught in a braita, if the field being sold was adjacent to another field belonging to the seller, then even if the surplus was of a minimal amount, the buyer can return the land itself to the seller, and the seller cannot demand payment in money. This is because the seller loses nothing when he receives a small tract of land, as he can cultivate it along with his adjoining field. By Rav Ashi raises a set of dilemmas which will result in teku. And I really should find out what number teku this is, because I was counting, and it was a nice discipline that I had embarked upon, nice journey, and it's something that should be followed. So let's find out what teku this is. It's the teku that's on Bava Batra, page 104b. What number teku is it? We're going to find out right now. A sage taught of Ashi raises a set of dilemmas that's going to result in teku. We're going to, Mirz Hashem, find out, God willing, we're going to find out what number teku that is. So if you'll all just bear with me. See, a little backstory behind this. There is a rabbi in Beit Shemesh, I believe, who wrote a book called Teku. And this book is a compilation of all the Tekus in Shas Bavli, and Talmud Bavli. And he basically he did a comprehensive work on all of the tekus. Number one is in brachos 25b. Second one, etc., etc. Bava Batra 104 Kuf Dalid Omud Beis. Oh, I'm not sure what's going on here, but after maybe it's better that we have it like this. So if we just scroll down, basically what he does is he counts out all the tekus and shas, is what he does. Okay, and here we are. So now, he goes, the first one is on brachos daf ches, then 25b, and then 42b, etc. So let's see what we're holding now. Okay. For example, Kedushin Daf Vav Aleph has a teku. That's 110th teku. Okay. So we're waiting for it to load. So if you want to skip this part, you can fast forward actually. Here we are. Okay. Bava Batra Kuf Dalid Amid Beis is the 171st, 172nd, 171 and 172. So I missed all the 160s pretty much. So we're back on board. The next one's going to be a little while from now. Kuf Dalid It's going to be almost another 30 daf. Like 28 daf. Because the next one's going to be 132. So, okay, so here we are. 171 and 172. Alright, let's go. Take 171. Let's just take 172 right here. The Mishnah teaches that in the case of field, hold on. Here we are. Rav Ashi raises a set of dilemmas with regard to a pit being the surplus and sold the field, the adjoining field belonging to the seller. What is the halacha? Should the pit be considered an interposition between two fields with regard to a water channel between two fields? What's the halacha? Should the water channel be considered an interposition with regard to a public thoroughfare? What's the halacha? Should the public thoroughfare be considered an interposition with regard to a row of palm trees? What is the halacha? Should a row of palm trees be considered an interposition? The Gemara states, all these dilemmas shall stand and resolve. Teiku. That is the 172nd. 172. And 172, just a nice trivia, is the amount of letters in Anabakoach. That's just the Anabakoach, not the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Halim. Then it's 196. But if it's just Anabakoach until Yodea Talumos, it's 172 letters. Which means right now we're at the 172nd Teku. Below Asaroiva Bilvad Machzir Loi Elakol Amoiser Klape Layo Tane Ravin Barav Nachmen Lo Yes Amoiser Bilvad Machzir Loi Ela Es Kol Haravoin Kulon. The Mishnah says, okay, I didn't read the Hebrew for the other ones, okay? By Rashi, Bor Mahu Tzitzik Amam Mahu Tzitzik Mahu Shetafzik Derech Arabim Mahu Shetafzik Michbod Dikla Mahu Shetafzik. Take it, okay? So the kids are now, we're at that part, we read Veloas Arova Bilvad Machzir. We read that already. The Mishnah teaches that if the surplus is greater than one quarter kav per se'ah, it is not only quarter kav that the buyer returns, rather he returns all the surplus. Since he is already required to make a refund, the refund must be made in the precise amount. The Gemara raises the question, isn't the opposite the buyer, isn't it the opposite? But the buyer is required to return the surplus even when the quarters of the kav remain in his possession. Ravina Barav Nachman taught the Mishnah as follows: not only must the buyer return the extra land that is beyond the limit of a quarter kav area per base se'ah, but he must also return to him every one of the extra quarter kav areas of land that he received beyond the stated area of a beit kor. When he's required to return the surplus, he returns not only the surplus but also the quarter kav areas over and above what had originally been stipulated to be included in the sale. Okay, that's the end of that. New Mishnah. The new Mishnah says, Mida v'chevel ani morchalach hein chaser hein yeser bat bitel. Hein chaser hein yeser mida v'chevel hein chaser hein yeser mida v'chevel. So we're starting a new Mishnah, and we'll probably have to start in the next thing because it's going to end off in the middle. So we're finishing off 104b with the Mishnah, but God willing, we'll return to it tomorrow or whenever we do it. The next stop, whenever that will be. Mishnah is, if the seller says to the buyer, I'm selling you a plot of land of a certain size measured precisely with a rope, more or less, thereby attaching to the sale two contradictory stipulations. Because it's measured with a rope, precisely, more or less. Okay, so it's more or less nullify the words. Measured precisely with a rope. Accordingly, But accordingly, if the surplus did not exceed a quarter kav per sa'am, the sale is valid as is. Similarly, if the seller says to the buyer, "I'm selling you a plot of land of a certain size, more or less, measured precisely with a rope," and it's probably the same thing. Okay, we'll have to find out next daf.